1% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get pumped, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in they Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the Hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters gon' move, whatever click you choose.
Say what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to Life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down! Now, for those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life, and I served 24 years straight in the California prison system. Yeah, that's me rapping right there on that intro. And if you want to get that song, hit me up on my email, 16tolifemusic@gmail.com, and I will give you the information on how to get it, man. Now, let's get into today's video, man. Unfortunately, I got some bad news to bring people out there, man. Unfortunately, my homie, very famous white Crip known as Pee Wee, has passed away. We got the news, I believe it was Friday, that he was found unresponsive in his cell. Unfortunately for him and his family and all those that, you know, loved him and cared about him, he was locked up doing some time, right? And so you may have seen the short that somebody had done on him, right? And this short, talking about my homeboy Pee Wee, got almost 4 million views. So let me show you guys a small portion of that now.
In the streets of California over the past couple decades, there has been a lot of buzz about a deadly white boy by the name of Pee Wee. This white boy has a reputation for being a grave digger and a boogeyman in the streets. Over the years, he has been talked about on countless podcasts, and everyone that knows him backs him up and swears by him.
And we had a white homie over there from my hood here by the name of Pee Wee.
Typically, when a white guy from a black street gang hits the yard and he decides to roll with the blacks, everything goes crazy, and the whites, also known as the Woods, put a green light on him. But this man had so much respect that the entire jail was willing to go to war for him.
What happened? Because he never got fucked with.
This man had countless well-respected Crips willing to crash out in jail for him.
If he touched my homeboy, I'm fucking him up, right?
Pee Wee isn't like these new age suburban internet bangers. Bro is an old school gangster and has no social media presence, and it is impossible to find any photos or videos of him on the internet.
So I had originally seen that short about a year ago, and of course when I first seen it, I read through the comments. I would check, you know, what people was talking about up in there. Eventually, when my homie called after I seen it, I let him know, and so I would tap back in with it periodically, right? And it has grown and grown and grown. Now, in the comments, I had seen sometimes people was making comments like, "Oh man, this dude can't be real," so on and so forth. So he definitely was real, man. Pee Wee, my homie, he's a few years younger than me, maybe 4 years. He moved to Bannon, I want to say around 1986. Now, during that period, when Pee Wee came out there, you know, he was already Pee Wee, man. You know, that was the name we called him. He was a small individual, you know. Eventually, I think he may have grew to be possibly 5'5", 5'6", you know. So that's how he earned the name Pee Wee. When he came out there, you know, to keep it 100, he already was on his gangster tip. You know what I'm saying? He had to look, you know, walking around dressed in khakis and, you know, the gangbang look back then. You know what I'm saying? And at some point, he started to run with the homies. Now, due to the fact that he was several years younger than I was initially, of course, we didn't run in the same circles, but, you know, he would be out there at the park hanging out, you know, doing his thing. I remember a time, like I said, in another story I did, him and some of the homies, younger homies, they had stole a car, and I don't know if they was running from the police, but at some point in time, they end up wrecking the car, and Pee Wee broke his neck, and he had to have like this halo, this neck stabilizer thing, and it had like a thing going up and thing around his head, and he actually had some, it was like a metal thing right here, and he had some screws drilled into his forehead to keep his head in place, So he always was active out there with the business, doing his thing. Now, when I got locked up in '94, eventually I ended up going to Ironwood, and eventually when I moved to Sea Yard, Pee Wee was locked up as well on Sea Yard. And so eventually we became cellies, I was on him all the time about, not necessarily on him, but just, talking to him about staying safe and being aware of his surroundings and not getting complacent, because at that time on the yard, even though he was a white Crip, the white dudes was not harassing him and trying to get him, but I was, letting him know that at any moment that situation could change, because a white guy could hit the yard from some other prison and be like, hey man, what's up with this white Crip on the yard running with the blacks, man? We not having this, right? And so I had actually interviewed another one of my homies, Swift. Swift is from Gateway, but he grew up also in Bannon, back and forth between Bannon and Palm Springs, right? And so I interviewed him, and in the course of the interview, I asked him, because he was there when Pee Wee pulled up, and I asked him, how did it happen that where basically they established whatever communications they did with the white dudes to basically, not trip on Pee Wee, and why didn't a riot jump off and happen over Pee Wee? And so in the event you guys haven't seen that interview, let me bring you a portion of the interview that I did with him. But one question I also wanted to ask you about too, man, is because you had mentioned a couple of times that you had been around on the yards and there were white Crips or white Bloods pulled up, and it was automatically a racial fight or a racial problem, this and that. Well, when I came to Ironwood, when I ended up coming to Sea Yard, you guys was already over there. The car was well established, 20-something homies. And we had a white homie over there from my hood by the name of Pee Wee. Right. And so what happened, because he never got fucked with? What was the...
So watch this though, right? When Pee Wee first come, right, they got him in orientation, but I'm in the cell. Easy is out, right? So Easy, go up there and go holler at him, right? So Easy come down, like, man, there's a white boy up here talking about he know your whole family, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, man, what are you talking about, right? You know what I'm saying? So I'm not even thinking about Pee Wee, right? You know what I'm saying? So I go up there and boom, it's Pee Wee. You know what I'm saying?
Y'all know each other from the streets.
Yeah, all that, right? You know what I'm saying? So I go back down there, I tell Easy, I'm like, hey man, that's the homie. You know what I'm saying? He a Crip, man, he from Bannon, right? You know what I'm saying? He said, so Easy say, man, it's gonna be a problem. I say, Easy, I'm not finna let nothing happen to him, right? I had a saying, man, not on my watch. I'm telling Easy, I'm like, hey man, you need to go holler at these white boys, man. Let them know, you know what I'm saying, we not taking this, right? So he go over there and let them know. So first they like, nah, he gotta go, or we taking off, right? I say, man, go back over there. Right? There's a white boy named Toker. I said, man, go back. Oh, he had a big ass swastika on his back. I said, go back over there. You tell him, man, I'm gonna turn that motherfucker into a bullseye. Yeah. Right? If he touch my homeboy, I'm fucking him up. Right? So Easy go back over there. I don't know if he told him that or not, but this is what I'm telling Easy, right? Right. So he go back over there, he come back, he say, hey man, he's straight.
So like I said, during the entire, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 months that me and Pee Wee was cellies on Sea Yard, I was just on him about, just basically keeping his awareness on point, because at any time the white dudes could decide to trip. And of course, Pee Wee was a soldier, he would work out, he would do his thing. And the reason that I would be on him a little bit about his awareness, because Pee Wee worked on the yard crew. And so sometimes he would be out there late at night, moving the water around and stuff, and I'd be out there hanging out with him, but I couldn't always be out there. So I was just telling them, homie, stay vigilant, keep your eye open, so on and so forth, right? Eventually we ended up getting into a riot, and we went to the hole. And so while Pee Wee never had any issues with the white prisoners in Ironwood, keep in mind that he, was doing time during a time where white Crips was targeted, due to the fact that he was probably about 5'6", 150, 155, didn't make his problems any easier. During the time that me and him was cellies, he did share with me some incidents that he had got into, right, due to the fact that he was a white Crip. Specifically, he told me about a time when he was in Tehachapi. Now, Tehachapi, when he came through at that time, it was a reception center. What a reception center is, it's the first prison they send you to when you leave a county jail and you've been sentenced to prison. Now, when you go to this reception center, they'll keep you there for maybe 3 or 4 months, maybe a little longer, and they'll assess, your prison history, your level of education, a whole bunch of different things, and then they factor in what type of institutional housing you're gonna need while you're locked up. So level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, things of that nature, right? And so, of course, he tells me he get to Tehachapi. He goes in the cell with another Crip, and all the white dudes appear to be upset and angry with him, right? And so, one day in particular, he goes out to the yard, and while he's on the yard, another skinhead rushes him. The skinhead rushes him, and they start fighting. They get into it. Eventually, the COs come, and they get the situation under control, and they put Pee Wee and the skinhead dude that rushed him in these, they have these basically like these cages, and the cages somewhat resemble a phone booth with a mesh wire around them, right? And so the cages that they happened to put these dudes in was maybe 3-4 feet apart, right? And so after a while, the skinhead dude says to Pee Wee, he says, "Hey man, what just happened between me and you, man, it's nothing personal." He was like, "Man, of course I had to do that because you run with the Crips, of course." And in those times they seen white Crips who ran with blacks as race traders, right? And so he went on to tell Pee Wee that anytime, in the future, you may happen to be on a yard and you see skinheads shave their eyebrows, that means they're getting ready to attack. You know what I'm saying? And so he was giving Pee Wee some pointers about things to look for in the event he went forward, and he could recognize certain signs that would maybe give him a heads up that skinheads was looking to try to do something. He also says to Pee Wee, "Man, did you happen to notice that white dude who was laying down maybe about 4 or 5 feet away? That was my cousin." He told Pee Wee the white dude was also supposed to participate in this attack. Actually, he told Pee Wee that the white dude was supposed to come over there and stab Pee Wee a couple of times. And then after he stabbed Pee Wee, he was supposed to join in and start fighting Pee Wee, which is a tactic that's some people refer to as the bomber tactic. So the white dude would be the stabber, the first one. Then the dude would come over there and start fighting Pee Wee. His cousin, who was going to be a stabber, he then would try to make his way get away from the situation and take the knife. So once the guards responded, they would only catch Pee Wee and the white dude fighting, and then the dude, his cousin, the stabber, more than likely would, of course, not be charged and beat the case because there was no knife found. And the dude that Pee Wee was fighting, those guys would just end up getting a mutual combat, if anything, right? And so, but the white cousin, he chickened out. He got scared at the last minute, and he did not want to participate. So the other dude just continued with the assault and came and got into it with Pee Wee. So of course, more than likely, the white cousin probably ended up going PC and rolling up, because if he stayed on that yard, knowing that he did not, carry out that attack, I'm pretty sure his folks was gonna deal with him, right? So, due to the mutual combat situation, Pee Wee told me, they sent the white skinhead to the hole. They sent Pee Wee back to the yard. So maybe a day or two later, Pee Wee is sitting on one of those bleachers inside, or excuse me, Pee Wee is sitting at a bench inside the day room watching TV when another skinhead came, rushed, and attacked him, and then they sent Pee Wee to the hole. They ended up sending him down to Ironwood, which is how me and him eventually ran across each other. So when we went to the hole, we stayed in the hole maybe 4 or 5 months. During that time, he got called back down to court for another matter, and when he came back to court, we was able to kick it for a while. I believe we were cellies again in the hole, if I'm not mistaken. Then he ended up actually paroling and going home, and when he went home, he left me a whole bunch of stuff. When he went home, he would tap in with me, send me some pictures, send me a package, so on and so forth, so he was a real solid dude, man. And so then eventually, fortunately for me, I was able to get out. But when I got out, in 2018, unfortunately for Pee Wee, he had got locked back up. Actually, I believe he had been locked up a time or two. Actually, I believe that was the third time that he was locked up since I last seen him. I think that was in 2000 and what was that? I think 2003 is when we got caught up in that riot. And so he had been locked up, to my understanding, I believe 2 or 3 times. And so unfortunately, in this last incident in which he got locked up and ended up passing away in prison, he had got sentenced to 55 years. So Pee Wee had went out to Montana, and we gonna keep it 100 here like we always do. The homie Pee Wee, Pee Wee was a gangster, man, and from time to time, Pee Wee liked to, smoke that PCP, right? And so in the course of going out there, some situation ensued where Pee Wee ended up getting into a shootout with a police officer up there, right? And so Pee Wee ended up being charged with attempted murder on the police, I believe possibly an attempted murder on an employee of a Sonic, and he eventually ended up pleading to 55 years, right? Pee Wee would call me often, man, all the time, and sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, right? And so, one day in the course of one of our conversations, he was just telling me, he was like, homie, I didn't really have no choice, man. He said the officer opened fire on him and he had to return fire. But, they always going to paint a different picture, right? And so for content purposes, in the course of this story, I researched it, right? I looked it up because I had the article. Somebody had sent me the article when I was locked up, and I still have the article in my photo album about him being arrested up there. But upon doing some more research, looking the information up online, I see where they are alleging that Pee Wee tried to rob the Sonics. He opened fire on the person at the Sonics, and then the police heard it. The police happened to be in the vicinity, heard the shots. He responded. Pee Wee shot at him. Then the police returned fire. There was a shootout. Pee Wee's gun jammed, and then the police, noticing that the gun jammed, hopped out and ran and tackled Pee Wee, which to me sounded a little weird. That he would, after an individual was shooting at him, he would run up and run up and notice that the gun is jammed and tackle Pee Wee. Nevertheless, he was arrested, right?
The Sonic shooter from last summer is sentenced to 55 years in prison. Justin De La Cruz, 38, previously pleaded guilty to charges including attempted deliberate homicide, robbery, and criminal possession of dangerous drugs. Last July, De La Cruz demanded money from a Sonic employee at gunpoint. Police say De La Cruz fired 3 to 4 shots at the employee, then another 3 to 4 shots as the employee was trying to take cover and get back into the restaurant. De La Cruz told officers he had been partying for several days, smoking PCP-laced cigarettes, and had meth in his possession.
I wasn't there, of course, so I don't know what transpired, man. But one thing that I know about Pee Wee, and anybody who knew Pee Wee knows about Pee Wee, man. Pee Wee was a hustler. Pee Wee was never a robber, right? Pee Wee, and I don't, of course, know every single thing about him, but Pee Wee sold everything, man, from things that sometimes, the state don't want you to sell to, cars, paint jobs, speakers. Pee Wee was a hustler. Pee Wee knew everybody from everywhere, man. I was amazed at how sometimes I would be talking to an individual and they like, yeah, man, your homeboy Pee Wee. I'm talking about from deep down in the desert, past Palm Springs, Desert Hot Springs, deep down going toward that way, Indio. Pee Wee knew people from out there. Pee Wee knew people all the way up to L.A. Pee Wee would be some of everywhere, and later on he changed his name to G Wee, you know what I'm saying? And so that's what he had started going by, was G Wee. But like I said, once again, I was just amazed at how many people knew G Wee, and G Wee was a hustler. When I was locked up at one point in time, he had opened up a shop in Bannon where he was selling, T-shirts and all types of stuff, right? So I just say that to say that I know Pee Wee was a gangster, right? He was out there in the street. He was doing what he was doing, right? But I have never known Pee Wee ever to try to rob somebody, to try to be, a robber, so on and so forth. So in the event that did occur, then, it is possible that he was on that PCP, right? Because some of the homies, when it initially happened, they was saying, yeah, Pee Wee, he went out to Montana and went swimming. And he was telling me that over the phone, which basically was a coded way of saying that Pee Wee had got wet. That's what we call when you smoking that sherm, you get wet. Pee Wee had got wet up on that sherm, and he had basically kind of tripped out. Because like I said, man, that's just not Pee Wee's makeup to try to rob something. Pee Wee has always been a hustler. He has always been known for getting his bread, right? Unfortunately, a couple of days ago, we get the call that Pee Wee was found unresponsive. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So eventually, what he ended up doing with the case in relation to the shooting out there in Billings, Montana, which is where he was. I believe I mentioned that. If I didn't, that's where he was, out there in Billings, Montana. And you guys may have heard about me talk about Billings, Montana, and do some of my Montana stories in the past. Well, after I started going out there, I brought a few of my homies out there, and they continued to come out there, hustle and get paper. It was a nice, place to go out there and hustle, So anyway, Pee Wee was eventually given 55 years out there in Montana, right? And so he still has some time to do. I believe in Montana you have to do 1/3 of the time. And so, like I said, Pee Wee stayed in contact with me constantly, from the time I got out and he got a hold of me until his passing. They had recently sent Pee Wee down to Arizona, I believe it was, to a private prison. He had stayed down there for a while, maybe a year or two, couple years. Then they had just recently moved him back to Montana. And so once again, I believe it was Friday, we get the call that Pee Wee had passed away, and I was shocked. I had talked to Pee Wee, often, and he was telling me that he had been having a lot of medical issues, and he was, of course, as it is often when you're locked up in prison, you are not having your medical issues tended to in a timely manner, and anytime you go to the doctor, a lot of times it's a hassle because the doctors often will assume that, you don't need the things that you're telling them that you need. And to keep it 100, right, from a lot of the things that I've read and looked into and learned about other medical systems, California does have a pretty good medical system for the prisoners as opposed to other institutions in other states. He often would complain about the things that was going on in these other prisons. He said it was nothing like California, and not just the medical, with a whole lot of stuff. He said doing time in Cali was way better. That's something that he often would bring up, right? And so he was having issues with his leg, right? And so they entered his cell, unfortunately, and they found him unresponsive. And so at this point, that's all we really know, that, they got an investigation going on, and they trying to look into basically why he passed away, man. And so, shout out to my homeboy G Wee, man. It's very unfortunate, right, to have to pass away in prison. But like I said earlier, Pee Wee was a gangster. And, it might be some people who may not agree with me putting this story out or whatever, but you know what I'm saying? Pee Wee was a gangster through and through. And, sometimes we know it is what it is. And, we know what comes with what we sign up for. Pee Wee, like I said, he was my cellie. We talk often. He loved cars. He loved his family. And, he was a gangster through and through. I never heard him whining or complaining about his time. It is what it is. Pee Wee, like I say, he was dedicated to the life. He had a well understanding from an old school perspective about the street life and the things that came with it, man. So it's definitely sad that he passed away in prison. It's very unfortunate circumstances. And so once again, man, once again, I would just like to, send my shout out, man, to the homie Pee Wee, started going by G Wee, and for everybody who may have knew Pee Wee and loved Pee Wee, man. So, hey, rest in peace, homie. I hate that this happened. And you know it is what it is, man. Anyway, it's your boy 16 to life. Resume normal program.
You think that I'ma be okay? I miss you so much and I got so much to say. I've been really out of touch since God took you away. If I could book a flight to heaven, I would book it today. I don't really think that I'ma be okay. I miss you so much and I got so much to say. I've been really out of touch since God took you away. If I could book a flight to heaven, I would book it today. I often talk to the skies, hoping you hearing my voice. Every time that I do,